my name is Tyler Pigott. I'm the CEO of Loan for Creative, a marketing agency that does business across the United States. And in our episode, we're going to talk about messaging. We're going to talk about the importance and the power and impact of clear messaging. And we're going to talk about how many businesses actually miss the mark on their messages, which is what's making their ad campaigns not effective and actually is what's wasting a lot of their marketing spend and their ad spend across their marketing campaigns. So tune in, check it out, and hopefully you're able to get something that's helpful for you.
Welcome to the Business Growth Architect Show. I am Beate Chelette. I am the host. I want to welcome you to our globally top 10% ranked podcast, where you will hear from industry experts about the strategies that are working right now to unlock hidden opportunities in any market so that you can grow your authority and scale your impact. And now let's get started with the show. Hello and welcome back. This is your host, Beate Chelette, and today I have Tyler Pigott with me on the call. And today we're going to talk about something that I am super passionate about, and which is almost like it's a painful subject, Tyler, isn't it, to talk about what we're going to talk about today? And
it can be.
Yeah, and that is about what do I believe and what is the perceptions other have of me, and how does that turn out to be an actual ROI? So Tyler, for somebody who does not know who you are, will you tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do?
So my name's Tyler Pigott. I run a marketing agency called Loan for Creative, started about 10 years ago, and we help businesses really clarify the direction that they're heading. And a lot of companies and a lot of brands have so much noise going on, and they need help kind of, navigating through that noise. And then once they land on that kind of clear message, amplifying that message to obviously in front of their audience, in front of potentially more prospects and ideally more clients. So we help in lots of different ways. Not going to bore people with all the different tactics and campaigns and activities that we can do. But that's kind of getting people to the same place that I'm at right now. So
one of the reasons, Tyler, I wanted to speak to you is because you address something that I think is a huge pain point for a lot of creatives or entrepreneurs. And that is, I know what I'm doing. I am a subject matter expert. I am the authority in my category, but why is nobody buying? Can you shed some light on the 10,987 things that go into that?
Yes, I'm happy to. We're going to be here until next Friday. It's going to be a great conversation. No, I mean, I can kind of scratch the surface and talk about the tip of the iceberg kind of. But for the most part, I would say I can speak specifically to the marketing agencies, creatives, but in general, entrepreneurs and kind of people running businesses. And, you generally will start with an idea that you turn into a business. It might be a service business, it might be a product. And most of the time that idea is solving some sort of problem, because most people pay for things that solve problems. And so it's got to solve some sort of problem. And over time, there's a chance that problem might shift or evolve. Maybe it's not a problem anymore because something else replaced it. Oftentimes that's in the creative space. It can be, technology, or they hired in-house, or you're approaching towards a different client base or larger clients or whatnot. And so reality is that when you're the entrepreneur and you have like this kind of beat, if you will, on what your client needs, you have to maintain that beat. You have to maintain that kind of closeness to your clients and understanding of your clients or your audience or your prospects for a long time. No matter how large the organization gets, the further away you get from the client, in some ways, the more dangerous it can become, because you're not really in tune necessarily with exactly what that client or that customer needs. And so probably just that alone maybe sparks a couple of ideas for different people that are listening of the importance of that, because the minute you get comfortable in that, oftentimes somebody else that has a more hyper-focused way of communicating or a better product or whatnot at the problem that you've solved, you'll probably lose some market share, lose some opportunities, because you're not quite in tune exactly with maybe where you could be. So I don't know if that makes sense, but that's kind of like, I guess, a setting up place so we can start talking about it.
Yes, exactly. So I definitely want to talk about the assumptions that I make as a business owner. Number one. So the assumptions that I make is, if I hear this correctly, are all based on my knowledge of what I know about my business and what typically happens to a client.
Sure.
Then we have something that changes, like COVID or post-COVID. So if we look at COVID, it went from work at the office, work at home, hybrid, to I have no clue where I'm working.
Yeah.
It changed people's value systems. Then we had you are the most valuable employee. We can't throw enough money at you. Right after we laid everybody off, only to find out we still need people to do the work, only to then say, just kidding, now there's a recession. Now we're going to fire everybody that we bought into expensively and we take all your things away. So how do changes in market like this, and I mean, we talk to entrepreneurs, these are just two examples, I think, but people really understand how a market trauma, let's just call it trauma to the market, how that will change an environment. So how do I prepare myself as a business owner to keep my eyes open when this happens, to make sure that my message is still on target?
Yeah, man, that's a great question. I think it's probably the $1 million answer if you can really prep perfectly for this. Because
it's going to be a very widely listened podcast if you answer that.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, it's honestly, I mean, as a business owner, but I'm also working with lots of other businesses in what I do. I mean, it's really hard. So just acknowledging that in general is just as you're kind of trying to predict the future, and it feels really unstable oftentimes. And so I think that you have to figure out a way as a business owner to ground yourself with like the principles. And so reality is like I run a business that happens to have people. Like there's people at the core of what I do, and I get to sell that expertise and those opinions and those skill sets and talents to other businesses that have people. And so for me, I have to make sure I'm always taking care of the people on our team, and I'm always taking care and looking out for their best interest. Obviously, we need to look for the best interest of the company and all those things as well. But I think that even when I watch some of those, larger organizations go on those hiring sprees and all those things, I think that's great. That person, that left working for me that got poached or something is getting paid more, and that's awesome. But they're only really getting paid more if they stay for those 12 months, because they're always, they're enticing with that longer, annual salary kind of thing. And so I think one is people paying attention. Businesses pretty much for the most part are going to always require people in some way, shape, or form, because most of the time you buy from people. Sure, there's things that's not entirely true, but for the most part, in consulting services and B2B services and a lot of business services, you're buying from people. And so I think that's important. I think as far as kind of like grounding yourself in the principles of it, I said this kind of in a little bit of the intro, but just, when you're not paying attention to your customers, you're generally moving backwards. And that's not always true, but if you're not paying attention to what your customers are saying or what they need, or they're canceling this service or they're going to this other provider, well, what is that other provider offering that you don't offer? Or what's the perk that they're offering that you don't offer? So not paying attention to those is a little bit of a red flag or yellow flag, I think, for some businesses. And that can be really hard. Like it can be, because I think the question oftentimes then comes of, well, how do I do that? Like, how do I know what my customers are doing? Or how do I know what my past clients or prospects are actually doing? And how do I come up with questions around that? Those are probably the first two that I would think about, is just what's the core of your business? And you got to keep your eye on that. So for me, like I said, it's people, and it's making sure I've got really talented and skilled people on our team. And then it's paying attention to what customers need so you can make sure you're solving the problem that they actually have.
Yeah, we have actually something we call the Airtight Avatar. We do this in 15 minutes. It's something that we provide our clients with and that we give out, is so that people really understand, how do you crawl in someone's mind? I always make them, Tyler, go through this exercise where I say, I want you to close your eyes. I want you to envision your client. And she gets up in the morning. It's 6:00. She has 2 kids. She needs to drop them off. She needs to be in work on time. There's a Zoom call where she's being told that the budget's being cut. She doesn't know how she's going to get this all done. Then her boss just rips her for something that wasn't even her fault, just because John, that jerk, just kind of like dumped it on her and made her look bad. And then you call. And then you call.
Yeah.
I said, so what do you need to say for her not to want to hang up on you? And people then are very surprised that they recognize that the mentality of somebody who works for an organization who might be buying from you does not have an entrepreneur mentality. They're employees. So it's a completely different mindset. You do a lot of HubSpot integration, and you help people, to get their marketing and advertising message out and fine-tuned. So when somebody comes to you and you see that blatant discrepancy between what they think and what how do you address that? Like, how do you lasso them back on the right path?
Yeah, that's a great question. I love I think you call it airtight avatar. Is that what you call it?
Airtight avatar, yeah.
Yeah. I love that concept, or at least like those questions, because it really is, even in that 15-second blurb, it was a great story of like getting me to that spot. So man, I'm even thinking like, what would I say in that environment, right? So that's really great, because I think that's like something that is a little bit uncomfortable, I think, probably for people. Like they don't know most people want the black white. They want the this plus this equals that, and this is a guarantee. And what you just brought up is a great example of, it's not going to be black and white necessarily, but what would you say in that environment? And it really does get your brain going in that direction. So I love that. As far as kind of, like that, I have a quick kind of, I guess, story I'll go into, and we get clients all across the board that ask different questions here and there. And there's a fundamental difference between two different types of clients. If a client comes to you and says, this is what I want, so call it, we do, one of the things we do is websites. So this is something that happened recently, and a prospect came to us, and we're going through the sales process, mapping out this big web project for them. And they got me on a call, and they said, hey, can you, like, before I sign the contract, can you just tell me what the return on the investment, what's going to be the ROI on this project? And I kind of pause, and I'm thinking about it. And I kind of respond, I go, well, I can't exactly tell you what the ROI of this project is going to be. And he kind of goes, well, that's a problem for me. And I go, but and I said, yeah, I understand that. And I go, but I'm actually not the one that told you need a new website. And then he kind of, there's no pause on that side. And I go, because I'm operating as a kind of, in some ways, we generally prefer to be a partner. We really want to combine, link arms, and run towards the goals you have. Whereas you're kind of coming at us like we're a vendor and you just need a website redone. So we're going to be that vendor for you, because that's what you chose. Because we did try to help you uncover what maybe that pain point was that you might have in your sales and marketing. But you're telling me you already know what it is. You already know it's your website. And by redesigning that website, it's going to solve your sales pain point that you have right now, or at least the immediate one. Is that accurate? And he just totally is backpedaling at this point, because I'm basically going, you're telling me this is the problem, and I don't know if that's the case. I haven't uncovered it. Our team hasn't jumped into anything, looked under the hood, all those things. So I use that as, I think it's a clear example of people can kind of understand it's one thing if I'm coming to you saying, this is what I need. It's another thing if you are helping me identify what that is. And so that can be done in lots of different ways. If I'm a consultant, and so I can help you uncover it. So I can meet with you, ask you lots of questions, and help you uncover what the challenge is. Also, you can tell me what the pain point is that you solve. If we came out front and I said, oh, we solve your sales and marketing problems by designing really clean user experience, great converting websites. Well, then great. Then this is my perfect fit client, because I've already identified what the problem is that I fix, and they're coming to me saying, I have that problem. And you're going, great. Awesome. That's all I said I'm going to do. That's what I said I'm going to do. I'm going to deliver this to you, and you've identified the problem, versus the other one where I'm helping you identify it as a consultant. And I think people oftentimes mix those two without trying. I don't think people sit there and go, oh my gosh, I can't wait to flip the switch on this person. But I think oftentimes as the buyer, we switch the two, because I think we oftentimes come to a solution, or a vendor, if you will, and they communicate the problem they solve. But I'm coming, and I might not necessarily be looking for that problem, but I'm expecting them to solve it. I'm not sure if that makes sense. I think you might have had a thought.
It makes a huge amount of sense. And here's why. And I want to make sure that we get this very clearly identified for our listeners, for our beehive. You look at this from the perspective of our clients have a limited understanding of the problem. They know what doesn't work. It's not working. The site's not converting. In their mind, they say, if the site is not converting, therefore it must be the website. So if I had a better website, it would convert better.
Yeah.
It hasn't even occurred to them that, let's say, and I'm sure you have your signature system where you go and said, there's these 10 points that we need to go through. Who is our client? What's their problem? What are we solving? Is this clearly identified? What's our client transformation journey? I find, Tyler, that most of the time, in 99% of all times, the subject matter, the understanding of the actual real problem is a small percentage of what the actual problem really is, because they cannot go to 30,000 feet. You go to 30,000 feet. So what would you say to our audience now, to our listeners that say, am I making assumptions, or should I not take my client's problem analysis at face value? But if I don't do that and give them what they want, they get mad at me. And that goes back to the give them what they want, and then you provide what they need. How do you do that? Is there like a magic formula to that?
Man, I wish there was. The only thing that I've ever come up with is you have to master the art of pushing back and telling the client they're wrong, but making them feel good while you're doing it. And it really, like, and I say that kind of laughing with a smile, but at the same time, like, you kind of have to be willing to push back on a client because your name's associated with it. So if a client comes to me and here's a list of, 500,000 contacts, can you email them? I need this amount of sales by the end of the month. And that's all I know. I'm going to ask a lot of questions and push back a lot. And there's a chance that they don't hire me because if they're really just looking for an hourly person that just is going to write an email and send it, I'm probably just not the guy because I know that it won't work. Unless that email list is perfect and all those things. And those are the questions you're going to start asking. But I think it's, what I've learned in my career is just that willingness to push back and ask those questions. And you're probably, the client's always right. Like that's what people say in quotes, often on a regular basis, or the customer's always right. And I'm not 100% sure that statement's correct. I think that you should be willing to work with the customer or the client, and you should be willing to talk to them, and you should be willing to get to the end result or the outcome that you're all trying to get to. But I think it's important to figure out how do you push back on a client or even a prospect in the sales process to where you are able to get to that 30,000 feet. I think most entrepreneurs, most founders are super stubborn and controlling. And I don't mean that as oh my gosh, you're a horrible person. It's the reality of you kind of have to be successful in running a business. And so, but when you're trying to work with that individual as a contractor or as a vendor in the services you operate, then you do have to potentially have a little bit of a negotiation / kind of almost that lawyer personality kind of concept to be able to push back on your client or your prospect in this kind of scenario. So I don't know if that makes sense, but it's kind of like that thick skin, that willingness to ask questions and keep pushing back until you feel like you're going in the right direction. So yeah. Well, I haven't really tried to answer that before, but that's what I've found, at least, is that you kind of have to be willing to sit in the uncomfort of, the tension of a client saying, this is what you should do. And you say, no, it's not. This isn't in the best interest of your brand. And then potentially walking away from that opportunity if they say, oh, you have to do this. I've had some funny things that I've done in the past where when clients have said that, oh, I just need you to do this. This is going to work. I guarantee this will work. And I go, are you sure you really want me to do this? I don't believe it's going to work. And then, yep, you have to do this. And I go, great, I'm just going to hit record here on the Zoom call. And I'm just going to have you say that. And I'm going to respond by, great, well, I can't guarantee the results on this, but you're really pumped about this and you can guarantee it works. And then they're totally silent and they won't record it because they know they want to be able to point the finger at me if it doesn't work. And so it does allow you to kind of again, come up with creative ways to push back a little bit till you not get your way, but be willing to go, I'm satisfied with this, and they are as well, and you come up with kind of a happy medium.
Well, there's a couple of things that you said. So number one, in growth architecture, we designed the signature growth system specifically to address that issue. Because if you have a client transformation journey that's clearly laid out, that has whatever, let's say these 5 particular points, you can then help identify with your client to say, well, out of these 5 points, if you were to guess which one it would be, and then they may say 2, and then you say, well, let's go deeper into that. So instead of them making an assumption of what their limited understanding of the problem is, if you have a diagnostic tool, and that's why I believe that systems are so powerful, signature systems are so powerful, because it allows you to help them self-identify. That was number one. Number two, this is also addressed in a book called The Challenger Sale, where this is exactly the part that you're describing of where you have to be comfortable to challenge the client and say, how do you know? Well, what do you mean? How do I know? Well, how do you know that is the problem? Well, the site clearly is not working. Well, how do you know? A site consists out of the message, out of the branding, the fonts, the colors, the call to actions, the freebie, the funnel that you're building, the ads that you're running. How do you know which one of those it is? Well, it must be the site, because I spent so much money on everything else. So, so now for somebody who now listens and goes, wait, I feel like we're on to something really foundational, fundamental to why there's such a problem for so many business owners to really grow. And I think, Tyler, it's this part. It's this part of the honesty of telling a client you're full of it because you don't have any idea what the actual issue is. You're just making assumptions. How do we guide them ever so gently. So you say you have to be willing to walk away from the job, because the alternative is what? A crappy client.
Yeah, crappy client, and the end result's bad. You spun your wheels for a long time, kind of thing. And that's okay. A lot of people, I mean, literally agencies and marketers make their money on that sometimes, and they'll take kind of whatever comes their way. It's just, there is a better way to, I guess, happiness, I suppose, in your job.
Yes. And let's talk about this right after this quick message. Are you looking for the hidden opportunities for you in this market? Or are you simply wanting to figure out what is your unique differentiation factor that makes clients want to work with you and not your competitors? If this resonates, I want to invite you to go to uncoverysession.com and schedule your 15-minute complimentary uncovery session with one of our business growth advisors that will take you through what your number one business growth blocker is, what you can do to remove it, and what your very best next step should be. And now let's get back to the show. I'm here with Tyler. We're talking about client happiness, our own happiness, challenging the sale, and calling clients on their BS, basically, or their limited expertise, knowledge, and what their actual problem is. So you talk a lot about nailing the message. Can you give us a little bit of insights on what does that even mean, nailing the message?
Yeah, it is a great kind of jumping off point from what we talked about, because I love what you talked about as far as those kind of signature systems. And in some ways, when you're working with a client, you're building like the baseline. I call it a source of truth oftentimes. You have to have something you can point back to that then kind of realigns you with whatever tactic, campaign, activity, thing that you're jumping into tomorrow or a year from now with that client, because you have to be able to point back and go, hey, what changed? What's different? I thought we were going this direction. This is what you talked about with this client, or in this phase of their buying process. This is what you communicated. And so then you're able to kind of tie back to things versus just everybody wakes up one day, has an idea and throws it on the whiteboard kind of thing, right? And so you have to kind of pin people down in some ways to actually make progress that's going to be impactful. And so messaging would be very similar. So we have a messaging framework that we run, and we've run it for years. It's pulled from the StoryBrand methodology. If you're familiar with that, there's 7 parts to it. Essentially, you've got a hero of a story, and it's a writing kind of methodology. You have a hero of a story. They have a problem. They need a guide that helps them with that problem. The guide introduces them to kind of here's the plan to get out of it, and here's the call to action, and then it either results in success or failure. And that 7 parts, if you overlay that on really pretty much every really solid campaign, video series, a lot of movies that are in the box office that have done well, there's a lot of similarities.
Tyler, go ahead. Tell us about this messaging system framework that you've developed that will help our audience to understand how they can nail their message.
Yeah, for sure. I think it is a great jumping off point from those things that you talked about, or some of those signature systems and things that you can really point back clients to. Like if we're talking about in this kind of consulting game that we're living in now, for this consulting world, you've got to build like those foundational elements so that I call it a source of truth, something you can tie back to, whether that's, hey, we're going to launch a new campaign tomorrow, and then you can say this is where this fits, or it's a year from now and have something to kind of exist from. I think we've all worked with people that wake up one morning and have a crazy idea, or wake up the next morning and all of a sudden don't like the color blue or red or something, and you've got to change everything. And it's helpful to be able to almost have like hey, where does that fit within this system or series or whatnot that you've created? And so our messaging system is very similar to that, where we're really following a 7-part framework that helps us really pull the information out of the client and focusing on the problem. The whole point of, people buy things that solve problems. They don't buy things that are the best oftentimes, which is really funny, but people buy things based on how well they understand it and how well because oftentimes you call it an engineer or a software developer or something, they're going to know the product really well and make this perfect product. But if they don't communicate all the benefits of that perfect product very well, no one's going to buy from them, because no one understands how does this actually help me? How does this actually solve my problem? And so we run through this kind of series of the 7-part framework from StoryBrand, if you're familiar with StoryBrand, but we've kind of morphed it a bit to a brand messaging process. And it starts with the customer. That customer has a problem of some sort. That problem needs to be solved. And so they're oftentimes introduced to a guide or someone that's going to help fix their problem for them. And oftentimes that's the brand. And so most brands make the mistake mistaken, making themselves the customer or the hero of their story, where actually the customer needs to be the hero of their story and the brand is their guide to help lead them out of that. So there's 7 different parts for it. And the whole thing is pointing people to understanding and uncovering the problem that you fix as a brand. And so the benefit of having that system in place is the same thing that we talked about earlier with having like that foundational system, because you've identified the problem. And then we use that kind of workshop that we run, that framework that we pull together as a filter for every word that needs to then be used in the future. So words that go on home pages, words that go in email, words that goes in paid ads, and on and on and on. Because if it's not talking about the customer's pain point or their problem, and it's talking about how long you've been in business or what this other customer or that, it's probably not going to be super effective, because you're not talking about what's applicable to me as the customer by not highlighting it. So we use that system as a filter to be able to write copy from. And then everything else is downstream from that, right? Your ads, your creative, all those kinds of things would also kind of flow through some of that as well. So I don't know if that makes sense, but that's kind of like a version of it. We've got lots of those. I think lots of consultants do. We have lots of those kind of frameworks that we run through, but from a messaging standpoint, people buy things because of words usually. And so generally nailing those words is ultra important.
Yes. So I think you said a lot of stuff, and I want to just unpack a few things here, because number one, you said make no assumptions, test the message, go out there. I believe that in order to be successful, especially as a consultant, coach, expert, trusted advisor, unless you have a framework or your signature system in place, you are not ever going to get over maybe a couple $100,000. You're never going to have a business, because you have your brain that solves the problem versus a system that you can teach other people that then can use that to help people. And you can then scale that by giving your employees this part of the piece, and find people that are better in these different elements of the framework, which is what everybody who's ever become successful in the consulting space has to have. You have to have this framework. So I think that's really important to nail down for everybody listening. If you don't have that, you need to figure out on how to get that done. Number two, it is this a clarity around what that framework actually is and giving it its own unique verbiage. So I always say to people, well, is it a guide, or is it a tool, or is it a workbook, or is it an action guide? Because if it is a guide, it always needs to be a guide. It can't suddenly be a tool or then morph into an action guide. It always has to be the same thing. If it's a blueprint, it's a blueprint. It's not a roadmap. It's a blueprint. So
totally.
And I think in our mind, what we try to do is, because we remember our 5th grade English teacher to say, be creative with the words that you're using. Don't keep repeating the same word. Does that work in advertising, or is this where a lot of people go wrong?
It's a good question. I think that probably the average person doesn't wait long enough and isn't disciplined long enough to see if something works or not. And so they don't wait long enough for the results, and they just say, oh, this is obviously not working after a week or 2 weeks. And that's not always wrong, right? Like it might be wrong, or it might be right. Like it's hard to know entirely based on not like looking at it. But I think that's where kind of like following the principles, knowing your audience, like it's like even that kind of messaging workshop I talk about, we're asking the sales team, we're asking customer success, we're asking marketing, we're pulling in numerous kind of viewpoints to be able to craft their messaging filter, because we're trying to land on what the actual problem is that business solves and what people actually buy it for. Those can be different. My internal message of what I think I sell and what I think I solve versus what we actually solve and what people pay for. And so that becomes then trying to really understand, that becomes the most important part, in my opinion. It's just going, do you know what people actually hire you for, purchase from you, add to cart, all those things? Why do people actually buy from you? Because again, it gets back to those assumptions. They're assuming that my creative ideas are going to always spark or always going to hit. And I've always found that just like the consistency over time, if as long as you're in the right ballpark, like you have to be obviously selling the right things and talking to the right people, but that's what's going to prove out probably more than just like a quick flash in the pan. Flash in the pan's great, but that means it's gone next week kind of thing. And so you want that long consistency. So I don't know if that makes sense, but I think there is a spot for creativity and there's a spot for longevity and sticking with it long enough to see if it works. And you've got to mix both of those probably and run some tests and get feedback and talk to customers about it. And I mean, so on and so on. So
this is a great way to put it, and a great way for us to end this interview. I mean, I can't believe we're already at the end of the show and it feels like we just started talking about something you and I clearly very passionate about. Yeah. You are absolutely correct. Is that I heard something really good from one of my other podcast guests, and he said, if you keep doing something new again and again and again, you always start from zero. You'll never get to a certain point. And that's what I'm hearing from you as well, to say, when you are testing something, make sure you give yourself enough time to make sure that you either exclude or include the validity of your message. Did I hear that correct?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
Excellent. So for somebody who now goes, I got to speak to Tyler, give me more, where can we send them? What do you have?
Yeah, for sure. So a couple things. One is check out our website. Our agency website is called loanforcreative.com, LONEFIR, and then the word creative.com. Also, I'm on LinkedIn a lot, so feel free to check me out on LinkedIn or send me a direct message or something like that. It's always fun to meet new people. And if I can help in any way or help point in any direction, I'm happy to do so. So just search my name first and last on LinkedIn. And then I think we've been doing like these website checks or these website audits. And then one of our kind of creative directors and one of our strategists jumps on a video and kind of reviews a website and sends it to you. So I think that'll be in the show notes if I remember right.
Yes, so absolutely. Tell us a little bit about that so they know what to expect from that.
Yeah. So hit the link, drop your name and your website and such into the form there. We won't spam you and reach out to you and try to sell you all these things. But it's more so we do these kind of what we call website teardowns. And so it kind of takes about 3 to 5 minutes, but we're looking for about 20 specific things on a homepage or a landing page, or basically things that we've seen that have been kind of best practices and principles for conversion on websites. And so we'll just do a screen recording. So like a Loom video or a Vidyard video or something like that. We'll pull in a strategist, we'll pull in a designer, and then oftentimes we'll put in like our creative director, and they'll kind of riff on your website, give you a bunch of ideas. And so sometimes people take those and they say, great, I've got a designer in-house and I've got all these things in-house and we're going to try some of these. Other times people say, cool, can you help us with these? And then everything in between. So happy to help with that kind of stuff, but that would be ideal if people jump in there. We'd love to give ideas and brainstorm and give away value if we can.
Exactly. And that's why we have you on the show, to help people to be better and to have the best version of the business that they desire, so that they can create a life and a work life that they actually enjoy. Tyler, this has been amazing. Thank you so much for hanging out with me today.
Yeah.
And just awesome information.
Thank you. It's been fun to be here.
And that's it for us for today. Thank you so much for listening or watching. Until next time, and goodbye. Thank you for listening to or watching the show. We are so excited that you're here, and we are very grateful for you. Now it's our turn to ask you for help. Please do share this episode with one other person that needs to hear what we were talking about today. If there's any question you have about business, please do reach out to us and let us know. And don't forget to schedule your complimentary Uncovery session at uncoverysession.com, where one of our business growth advisors will help you to figure out what your number one business growth blocker is in only 15 minutes. And that's it for us today. Until next time.